Welcome to the Borgen Podcast, the only English language podcast about fictional Danish politics. On our show, we explore the people, events, and parties that make up the fictional Danish parliament on Borgen. I'm one of your hosts, Amy, coming to you from Istanbul, Turkey, and I am, as always, joined by my good friend and co-host, Chantal, who broadcasts from her room with a fabulous view in Toronto, Canada. This is a bonus episode, and we will be discussing issues linked to season 2, episodes 5 and 6, in which we learn about Kasper's past. Kasper Juul, of course, is the spin doctor for Birgitte Nyborg, the prime minister. And throughout the first and into the second season, there's a plot line developing about his history and his childhood, and in a lot of ways, his identity. And in this episode, there are topics relating to child abuse, physical and mostly sexual abuse, actually, and its effects, and a little bit on mental health. So if that is a sensitive issue for you, we recommend that you skip this episode. Don't make yourself feel bad on our account. Please take care of yourselves, listeners. Okay, now what I really wanted to start off with is to talk about, let me just summarize the plot a little bit. So we see Kasper throughout season 1, around episode 8 in season 1, we learn that, his father, that's the episode where his father dies. We learn that there was a major conflict between them. And I think in that episode, that's the episode in which the viewer learns that Kasper suffered abuse at the hands of his father. We learned that he had a different name. We learned that his original name is Kenneth. I'm not even sure if Juul is his correct surname or not. I can't remember anymore. But we learned that he has changed his identity. And we learn his mother is in a nursing home, and all of the constructs and stories that he has told to Katrine and others fall apart in that episode, because his father, we learn, is not a military helicopter engineer or designer. His parents do not have property in France and wherever else he says they did. He's not spending Christmases at his uncle's at a large country house. We saw him, in fact, spend that Christmas that he called Katrine and pretended he was at his uncle's house in a pool hall by himself, with a lot of smoke and like one other dude. And it looked pretty dodgy. So this event in Kasper's past informs his development as a character throughout the series. And I think it's a really interesting take for the writers of Borgen to focus on the sexual abuse of a boy character, because we don't see film and TV shows that focus on boys as abuse victims, actually. It's not, it's not something that comes up a lot, and a lot of people probably don't even consider the effects of abuse on boys, but it does exist. And, I've certainly known people in my life that have experienced these issues. I'm not going to talk about their cases specifically, but I do know people who've gone through it, both men and women, actually. And I've often wondered, actually, if some men don't report their abuse and can't get help because men are not supposed to be abused. Now, nobody is supposed to be abused, okay? But what I mean by that is that women and girls are told from a young age to watch out for men. They might grab you, touch you, say things to you that are disgusting. Don't go home alone at night, walk in a group. Walk with campus security when you're a university student. If you're going home from the student pub at night, watch your back all the time, even in the daytime. Be careful. Lock your doors. Don't wear that outfit. Watch how much you drink. Don't accept a drink from a stranger. All of these little safety rules that women navigate on the daily, in their daily lives. Okay. Or how to conduct yourself at work. Don't wear, you have to dress properly. If you get a promotion, is it because she, slept her way to the top? Like, we see those kinds of plot lines come up. Like, I'm thinking of Mad Men in particular at that point. where a lot of women characters are accused of having done that. Like Joan comes to mind, who's one of my favorite all-time TV characters of all time. Just saying. So like my point is that women are trained to expect to be harassed from a young age. This is the expectation. In fact, I never had anybody tell me, oh, this might happen to you, but it probably won't. But you can mitigate these things by doing X, Y, and Z. No. It's like, this will happen to you. You have to do these things to prevent this from happening to you. And nobody tells boys that. They are supposed to be too tough for that to happen to them. They don't learn to walk across parking lots with their keys in their knuckles, or go home in groups, or never put a drink down in a bar. Nobody teaches them that. I remember even discussing this with a friend of mine here in Istanbul when we were like going out for a drink or whatever. And, telling him like, I think about where I walk and like where the lights are. And like, if somebody's behind me on the street, do I have to turn around? Do I have to run? Do I have to like, oh, you never wear heels out when we go out. I'm like, yeah, because I walk home, and if I have to run away, I'm not going to get caught by having bad footwear, like these are things I seriously think about.
These are things I think about too. And, I'll speak, I think, for a lot or most or all women, that we do watch our behind our shoulder. I know I do that all the time. I always take, stock of where I am. And even for my friends, my male friends, I tell them, I said, try to imagine what it's like for a woman. And I say to them, and these are my good friends, they're like my brothers. I say to them, I said, when you're walking down the street at night and you see another woman on the same side as you, or a woman, in plain sight of you, you should consider your actions and maybe crossing the street just to give her a bit of comfort and safety. Because I guarantee you that woman will be looking over her shoulder, taking notes of where are you? How close did you come? Where are you going? Did you get into that car? Who's coming out of that car?
Yeah, exactly.
Things that we are conditioned to since we're young girls to think about.
Yeah, it's automatic, right? It's autopilot. Like walking anywhere after dark, it's like you look behind you constantly, like I remember this is a trick I picked up from watching The Wire. Okay. Another show that we both, that we both really appreciate. So there's a point where, I think somebody is telling Kima how to do surveillance. Okay. Or she's telling someone how to do surveillance. And she says to that person, use the city, like use windows to see what's going on behind you. Use car mirrors to check out what's going on around you. If there's a camera or those like security mirrors in a store, use those to figure out where people are. And I was like, oh, that's really clever. And so since then, I've actually done that. Like I will watch where people's shadows are behind me or their reflections. And
I do the same thing. When I see a shadow behind me, I'm like, oh, who is that? Who's coming so close to me?
Yeah, exactly. And in Istanbul, it's really crowded here a lot of the times, and sidewalks are really narrow. So it happens to me constantly. So it's always something that I keep in mind.
Yeah. And for me, personally speaking, I actually do cross the street. If I see people coming down my way that look a bit dodgy, I will cross the street because I don't want any altercation. I don't want to be talking to them talking to me. You just mind your own business and keep walking.
Exactly. There is a really excellent essay. I just pulled my one of my old AP textbooks off my bookshelf. And there's a really excellent essay about this by Brent Staples called Just Walk On By, Black Men in Public Space, which is a really interesting take on that exact issue of men, how men are perceived in public. And of course, a man of color is going to perceive himself differently, right?
Yeah.
Because he knows that other people are going to perceive him as a threat.
Yep.
Right. Because of obvious, like,
even before he opens his mouth, even if he's far away, no matter what he's wearing, he's a threat.
Yeah, exactly. And he talks about like that exact issue and how he never thought of himself that way, and how he like would whistle Beethoven so people would get the idea that he's not like a hoodlum, It's a very interesting essay. So if you want a little bit more of a deeper dive, go read Brent Staples' essay. And he's a fabulous journalist, by the way. Love his writing. He's
Man of color? Man of
yes.
color?
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
Good.
An American. I think he wrote that essay about the time, and he was living in New York and Chicago, I think. But I'm not sure if he might be from Baltimore. There might be a mention of Baltimore, speaking of The Wire. But anyway, we have digressed a little. So I am going to bring it back.
Put us back on track with Kasper.
Yes, get us back on track for Kasper, right? So in general, in society, the abuse of boys is not especially highlighted. Yes, there have been some other films that address this. I just watched Sleepers from, I think, 1995 or 1996. Brad Pitt, Jason Patric, Robert De Niro.
Yes. That was excellent. Right?
Yeah, and that story is supposedly true, but of course the institution in question denied it. But that's about 4 young boys who get sent to a reformatory in the late 60s in New York. They're from New York. They get sent to this reformatory, and they're habitually physically and sexually abused by the guards there, one of whom is Kevin Bacon, which I find it really hard to picture him as an abusive person. Like, I just like it, so incongruous. His Instagram is so great, right? He's really not like that character. So anyway, that's one instant. And then like the other film I thought of, like This Boy's Life with DiCaprio, about Tobias Wolff, the writer Tobias Wolff, about his childhood with his abusive stepfather, who I think is also De Niro. And that's so
I don't know that.
Yeah, that's an interesting film too. But very rarely is the focus on sexual abuse of boys, and very rarely is it like this kind of, familial abuse, okay, where the father is sexually abusing and sexually exploiting the son. Okay, so as we know, Kasper's father like lends him out to his creepy pedophile poker buddies to have their way with him when he's like 8 to 13 years old, and it accumulates in Kasper stabbing his father. Now let's,
and I'll also point out about that situation, Amy. Yes, it usually is, from what I've read and what I've seen through the films that do address it, it's usually a close contact. So maybe not a father figure, but a close family friend, someone that's earned that trust with the family and with the person that is on the receiving end of that,
the victim.
Whether it be a close family friend, a neighbor, someone that's constantly in this person's life, and or another family member, right? So that they kind of hide in that role of, I'm a family friend, I'm a trusted relative, no one would ever suspect me. And then this is what the ideas they have to do, and it's terrible.
Yes, and that idea of, I mean, statistically, that's correct. That's where abusers come from, right? Close relationship, the trusted adult role, right?
Right.
Coaches, it can be coaches.
Yes,
it can be teachers. It can be teachers. I hate to say, being a teacher, like, I just did a sexual abuse awareness training course this year, actually. It can be like other community members, like community group leaders, for like youth group leaders, or it can be anybody. And fortunately, it's, even though abuse happens, it's still relatively rare. I hope I can say that statistically. I mean, like, it's not uncommon, but like, it hasn't happened. It's not like it happens to everyone I know, but then again, a lot of people don't talk about it. So who knows what the real numbers are, right? It's very difficult to say. So now, Kasper experiences this. So his identity changes, right? He's Kenneth when he's a child, and we see him only as Kasper as an adult. And Kasper, the spin doctor, seems to have everything together. He's super professional. He's really skilled at his job.
Yes, very intuitive. Things come natural. He doesn't have to work hard at thinking of a plan. He's very experienced, and he knows what to do. It's very instinctual to him.
Yes. And yes. And in some ways, I'm starting to think that, like, if you really want to get analytical about it, if this was a novel and I was doing a thesis on it, I would say that Kasper's survival instincts as a child, having to be duplicitous and hide from the outside world that this was happening to him, makes him a better spin doctor, because he's used to finding routes away from
finding solutions.
Focusing the attention on something else, turning the narrative around to change it into something else, or using information to be pitched a certain way to get a certain result. He's had to do that all his life, if you think about it, right? Yeah. So in some ways that like, and
giving him some strength and perspective.
Yeah. And kudos to Pilo Abek for, is that how you pronounce his name? I can't remember. I think so. If I got it wrong, I got it wrong. We all know who I'm talking about. Kudos to him for doing such a fantastic job as an actor. He's a skilled actor anyway. He's also been in Game of Thrones. He was a Greyjoy in Game of Thrones. He's been in tons of stuff. He's great. He's a great actor. And I really appreciate his skill level. I mean, and also like he's easy to look at. I mean, nice, tall, blondish Danish guy. Oh, so hard to watch. Anyway, that's an aside. I still think actually, if I was going to have to choose which actor I think is the hottest on Borgen from a, heterosexual female point of view, I would probably pick Philip, but that's just me. But anyway, that's another story for another time. Okay. So, Kasper, now, in the lead up to Kasper telling Katrine about what happens to him, we see this as the cause of all of the tension in their relationship. And the reason why they split up, because it's not the abuse itself, because of course Katrine doesn't know about it, but it's because Kasper has been keeping it from her and making up stories about who he is, his family history, his identity, his parents' jobs, what they do, why they never meet, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. There's always excuses, right? And so she finally can't take that anymore. And she breaks up with him. And she's broken up with him at the beginning of the series, in fact. But when she's in the very first episode of Borgen, she's in that situation with Ole and he dies and she calls Kasper to get her out of that mess. Yes. So they still clearly have this professional and personal connection that never breaks. It never breaks.
Talked about that in the very first episode of our podcast, how the way the setup is that we understood immediately that these two people had a very strong connection to each other, Katrine and Kasper, and that he was a trusted person in her life. Yeah. And he never faltered on that. He knew exactly how to get out of that situation and save her and support her. And thinking about them now in the middle of season 2 is where we're at. I don't fault Katrine at all, because
me neither.
You want to know them and understand them so that you will know how to love them.
Exactly.
You want to listen to them, respect them, what they're saying, appreciate where they're coming from, the struggles, the joys, the celebrations, the difficulties, the dark areas.
Yeah.
Because you want to know how to love them if you want to be true to this person and be serious, to be committed with them. And I think I, as a viewer, felt very sorry for both of them, because I know they both want to be together. I know they both love each other. I know they have an unshakable connection to each other, but they just have this challenge where Kasper is unable to open up because he's afraid. I think he's ashamed. I think he's alone.
Yes.
I think he has no support. I think he's afraid of opening this can of worms. And what if Katrine doesn't respond in a positive, supportive, understanding way? And on her side, she's trying to be that listener and cause a support. Of course, she has no idea what is going on. But in that episode, Amy, I remember we talked about it, the very end of one of those last episodes, how intimate, that was your word you used for it. And you were right. That scene where he leaves her with that box of things that he had gathered from his childhood, including videotapes of the news recordings about the father being led into jail, and they had a shot of young Kenneth and shoes and all these sentimental things. And I think she
that's what I'm going to talk about next, actually.
Well, there you go.
Because this is my leading up. This is my episode to lead. So
you're welcome, Amy. Go for it.
I mean, although it really doesn't matter. Either one of us can talk about this. It's 50,
go ahead.
It's 50-50, but this is exactly precisely in my notes, and I know where you're going with this. So, right. So that is the scene I was going to talk about next. I mean, I was going to talk about his behavior leading up to that scene and the results of that final scene, that very intimate scene between him and Katrine, which is like extremely moving and powerful. And I talked about this with another friend of mine as well. And he also pointed out that that's something you don't see in storylines like this. You don't see this kind of supportive intimacy, but I'll get to that.
Or the girl coming to rescue the guy.
Yes. Yes.
The guy is in this situation where he feels absolutely gutted and upset and confused and angry. And he's
lost.
trying to reach out to someone. And it's the woman that comes in and takes care of him, which is so beautiful to see.
Yeah. Although there is always there is always a touch of the reform the bad boy storyline in there too. Like, which is almost a gender trope again, like the girl fixes the broken boy, you know? And if we look at, you know, my personal life, that's a fairly common plot line, but I'm trying to change that. Okay. Like that's another story for another time. Okay. So back to Borgen, less about me. Okay. So we see Kasper's normally sleek and professional exterior break down. Okay. All the stuff with Svendaga Sultam leading up to this with the immigration, the Youth Criminal Act and stuff pushes Kasper to the edge. We see him kind of falling apart from episode 8 in season 1, slowly, right? That's the funeral scene where Katrine is the only one who shows up and realizes that something is amiss. That's where she clues in that what Kasper has been telling her about his life is not correct. And she realizes that you obviously are keeping secrets from me about your family. When are you going to tell me the truth? And it doesn't happen until he falls apart under this professional legislation starting to break things apart for him.
Right. Okay? And just recap, Svendaga wanted to lower the age of criminal responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's what really, you know, jolted Kasper and made him react the way that he did, very angry.
Yes.
He had a lot
because it would have
yelling and being very angry to Svendaga, but also to Birgitte when they were talking about it in her office.
Oh yeah, he loses control completely. Yeah. He's drunk at work. He sleeps with the aide. He's doing all kinds of things he shouldn't be doing.
But
he's completely lost the plot.
He can't say why because he's ashamed.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, and that's part of the stigma of abuse. I mean, obviously women, of course, experience shame and horror at abuse too. But within, like, you know, feminist circles or female culture, we do have a tendency to share more. Mm-hmm. So I think women are maybe more likely, of the people who get help for these kinds of issues, women are more likely to get it. Women are more likely to get mental health help in the first place anyway, as far as I'm aware. So for a guy to be sitting on something like that is not unusual. And it certainly, you know, explains this outburst of bad behavior that we see. But it also explains his kind of pattern of bad behavior in terms of like an inability to form intimate relationships because he hasn't healed himself or, you know, been able to work through all of the trauma from that abuse, which culminates in him stabbing his father, not to death, of course, because he dies in season 1. But it certainly, you know, leaves Kenneth as a shell of a boy, and he goes away to a boys' home and has to change his identity, and all these different things happen. It's not clear if he's constantly in touch with his mom or if it's kind of sporadic. It looks like it's sporadic contact, and she certainly seems to be, you know, suffering from some kind of mental breakdown. She seems somewhat aware of what happened, but it's like this white elephant in the room. She doesn't talk about it, and her mind seems to be going. And I'm, you know, as a casual observer, and again as a deep analyzer of this show and its characters, I would say that makes sense, because like that abuse that she suffered, because undoubtedly hiding it is a form of mental abuse. Knowing that your child is being abused by somebody is a form of torture, right? So he's like, the abuser doesn't just pick one victim. There's not just one victim when there's abuse. You know, it spreads out into the family, and
and by association.
By association, peripheral trauma.
The life of this man, and
I feel like her mental state, her ailing mind that we see her with, could be a result of that kind of trauma. I mean, it's obviously multiple causes for actual dementia, but like in terms of the character in the show. It's goes together. So then we see, Kasper's trying to hold Kasper together and bury Kenneth along with his father, but he can't do that. And the redemption and clarity and the beginning of his ability to heal himself only comes about when he does hand Katrine that box with all the documents and etc. paraphernalia relating to the stabbing to her. And he waits in the street below her apartment as she goes through the box, discovering the truth about this man she can't help loving, as you pointed out, despite their history, the messes, the lies, and everything else. Okay. And that's where we get that tremendously intimate scene where she holds up the baby shoes and is like, oh, it's so cute. And then digs down and it's like, it's not cute. What's under there is not cute. Boy of 13 stabs his father. And 13 years old is significant because it would have made him a criminal rather than, a victim, which is why this bill kind of pushes him to the edge, as we mentioned. And then when she goes through the box, the next time we see her is like the close of the episode. She goes down into the street. They don't say anything. There's no dialogue. She just puts her hand on his shoulder or his chest and starts crying. And he just embraces her. And that's how the episode ends. And I think the fact that there's no dialogue there is perfect. I think that is very well written. I think that's naturalistic. I don't know what you would even say to someone in that situation. So the fact that there's no dialogue there is good. There are no words.
There's no words. And I thought that scene was beautiful and perfect. The lighting, the fact that she was kind of looking up at him. She had her hand, as you said, on his chest or his shoulder. And she had a tear fall because this is so emotional. What do you say? How do you begin this conversation? And I just thought it also amplified the love between them.
Yes,
that she
absolutely
really is gutted when she sees this and puts this together upstairs in her apartment and comes downstairs to see him. I thought it was a very beautiful scene.
Yeah, me too. And it's you're right. It's so unusual for like, I mean, yes,
rescue and say,
yes,
I got you.
Yeah, to be there and unwavering support from the father's funeral all the way through, from the end of their relationship all the way through. At worst, Katrine has been a good friend to Kasper at her worst.
Mm-hmm.
And that's better than a lot of people get. Many people, myself included, if I encountered a man who was like all Mr. Sleek and like, I figured he was telling me some crazy ass story about his family history, I'd be like, buddy, get over yourself. I'm done with you. And like, I would walk. I wouldn't want to know after a certain point. But Katrine never lets that go because I think she suspects, maybe because of her journalistic instincts, she suspects that something else has happened. There's a reason why he's lying. It's not just bravado. It's not just like to try and make, like, it's not like something silly, like he's a working class boy who came from poverty, pig farm, like Katrine did. Isn't her one of her relatives a pig farmer? And so,
and brother, like, I think.
Yeah. And so she, he's not like trying to hide like his class or his, education or anything like that. He's actually hiding this trauma and has not been able to deal with it. And we see them in subsequent episodes after this together again, which, sorry, spoiler alert. Sorry. Mm-hmm. I mean, Borgen's been out for a while, people. If you haven't figured this part out yet, I can't help you. But
yes,
so
and as a viewer, I also, I watched it by myself for the first time, and I thought their feelings of the bond and the love and the respect and the care was established before they got talking about his parents. Very strongly, that was established. So it's not good. Whatever comes up when you love someone, whatever comes up, you're going to try to deal with it with them to help them. It's part of loving somebody, right? And being loved in return is having that openness and trust.
Yeah. And being
not afraid to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Being not afraid to be vulnerable, being a supportive person, understanding that everybody's lives are messy to varying degrees, you know? So to have him like Yeah, that moment was really something different. And even that whole plot line, like I really can't think of another show where something like this happens. I really, although if we think of I'm trying to think of other characters with switched identities. So I mentioned Mad Men. Don Draper had
Yeah.
it switched his identity too, but that doesn't work out well for him in the long run. It causes his marriage to break down, right?
And the
Um,
pressure of having to live this double life.
yeah, live this double life,
And
live
I
this
believe
lie.
for Don Draper, he had a friend, a very dear friend of his that he couldn't. This was the woman I think he visited in California
That's right.
towards the end of
She
the
knows.
series.
She's the only one who
He
knows.
knew what his true identity was, but
Yes.
otherwise, he always had this mask on. And I guess, it was no coincidence that the writers chose to give him the name Draper to
Yeah,
drape
I never,
himself, right?
oh,
That I am Amy, that was
that's,
an English too.
yeah, I never even thought of that. Oh my
Yeah, but
goodness.
I thought about his name like Draper. I'm a draper. I'm hiding. I'm wearing a mask. And I think it's
Yeah,
exhausting when you can't let out who you are, as an
of
LGBT
course.
person. I mean, we talked about this in the last bonus episode about Trolls Hoxenhaven. For
Oh
me,
yeah.
it's exhausting. It was exhausting having to carry around this secret or, this beautiful part about myself, which is actually no different from anyone else, except the gender is different. It's a girl,
Yeah.
not a boy. It's exhausting and tiresome, and it chips away at me or people that had to live this double life for whether they live it for their whole lives or they live it
Mm-hmm.
in their professional settings but not in their personal settings. I think it takes a toll on who you are and the capability or the ability for you to be the full person that you are. Um,
Yes.
so I felt badly for him that he had to do that. I feel badly for Casper or anybody else that has to do that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Living a double life is never comfortable. And it's another form of trauma, actually, trying to hide yourself. It does wear you down. And like as we know, statistics for self-harm and suicide and things in the LGBTQ community, especially for young people, is quite high.
Yeah.
And it's that I feel like if our society was just a tiny bit more enlightened, that could be avoided, you know, just by people accepting their children for who they are and society just being like, oh, you identify as whatever.
Whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine. That's okay. But
Yeah.
I think the
Next topic,
conversation and the
like,
dialogue, and
oh,
we talked
is
about
this
this.
is this your partner? Oh, it's nice to meet him, her, them. Like, what? Who cares?
Cares. All I care about is like I tell my friends this all the time. Like all I care about is you find someone that is a decent human being. I don't care
Yes,
who it is, what they look
decent
like,
human being.
what color skin they have, what gender identity they have. None of that matters. I want to know that they have your back. They love you. They're committed. They're loyal. They treat you with
Exactly.
respect. And I'm happy. I don't want to know anything else. I just want to know that. Take care of my friend.
Yes.
But we talked about this in the Hoxenhaven episode, and we'll talk about this now in this Casper episode. Is that to me, I think there are more resources available. We talked about this back when Trolls Hoxenhaven was a young man, young boy. There was probably no resources that he can go to. For Casper, there are probably no resources we can go to. And I know here in Canada,
Yeah.
I live and record from Toronto. Um, recently in the news, there was all these stories that came out about the Hockey Association
Oh,
and
yes.
the
That's a bad business.
amounts of abuse that happened. And it's rampant. And you started off this episode saying it's a close person, also a coach.
Coach.
It
Yeah,
could
I
be
was
the
thinking of
manager
the
of the
hockey. Yeah,
team,
I was
right?
thinking of that as
And
well.
how these stories are starting to come
And
up to the forefront, and how I don't want to say glad because I never want to hear these stories, but I'm happy that a space is being created for this dialogue.
yeah,
This is
let's
what
put
happened
this
to me. Yeah.
yeah, let's put this out in public and talk about this as a thing that actually happens to people so we can deal with it.
And let's not hide it and let's not pretend it didn't happen. And very recently, the CEO of that organization had to step down.
Yeah.
To me,
Well,
that's a very powerful.
and not just like,
This is
not
not
just,
tolerated.
yeah. And the creepy thing about the hockey issue in Canada is the Junior Hockey Association. Some of that abuse was inflicted by the players upon people in the community, women in the community in particular. They had a fund of money taken from like community hockey registrations. Like my nephew plays in a community hockey team. So his registration fee gets sent to Junior Hockey Canada. Some of that money from those fees got put into a legal defense fund to cover up sex abuse and sexual harassment cases.
Oh my God.
Like, what the hell? I could use a stronger word, but we don't do that here. Although I could, because there's no rules. But we all know what I'm trying to say. And I was like, when my dad and I were talking about that, and he was like, oh, the junior hockey board should have at least 3 women on it. And I'm like, why not all women? It's been all men. It doesn't seem to be working very well. You know, I think RGB said that about the Supreme Court one time.
Why can't it all be women?
Yeah, how many women should be on the Supreme Court? And she was like 12.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, what? And she's like, well, it's been all men, and nobody ever questioned that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, now that's another case where things have gone quite wrong, but that's another story for another time too.
Yeah. So bringing it back to Kasper.
Yeah, Katrine's situation where she had to get an abortion wouldn't be addressed in an American TV show, not anymore.
Yeah.
You know? Like since the overturning of,
maybe it would be to show the ridiculousness of that situation, what women actually go through. And
yeah,
some people, men, I'll say men, they're the ones that seem to always be in decision-making or majority decision-making bodies. They don't know, or they don't want to hear, or they know, but they don't care, because this is not about actually the task. It's about the role.
Well, at least, yeah. And at least, you know, in American politics, which is fortunately quite different from fictional Danish politics, which is what we focus on. I bet real Danish politics are slightly messier, but we're still talking about like Northern Europe, which has very democratic standards and still a very social democratic bend in its politics generally. I think with like most of the Scandinavian countries in Germany and Netherlands as well, to varying degrees, are run on coalitions. And you certainly have like where there's many more parties involved. So a two-party system is not a fair representation of anybody's ideology, first of all. And the issue, you know, the ironic thing about like the Republicans being so anti-abortion is that how many of those men have had to provide one or arrange one for someone at some point? Like one of, you know, one of my favorite comedians, Mark Maron, who has his own podcast, which is way more famous than ours, it's called WTF. He does these great in-depth interviews, and he was talking about it in the preamble to one of his interviews. And he was like, you know, he was saying like, well, this is a men's issue because, you know, how many men out there have paid for one?
But they're the ones getting women pregnant. So it is.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, they can't do it by themselves. And, you know, oftentimes like men are responsible for helping a woman get an abortion. A lot of times he's like, somebody else is involved in that.
And if a woman is not able to get an abortion,
human issue.
The men in theory should be
stepping up
to provide for her.
Yes.
And say, and that's a child. We need to spend more money on this kid. This kid is going to do
yes. And that's the other interesting thing about the quote unquote, you know, conservative stance on all of these issues. They care about these kids until they're born. After that, not so much. Where's the education funding? Where's maternity leave? Where's parental leave for either parent? Where's free health care for women and children and pregnant women or people who are pregnant? What is that? What is that? You can't say everybody should have children, but we're not going to put any systems in place to support that decision. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But that's very off topic from talking about Kasper and Borgen. And I'm sorry if, you know, somebody is going to send us some mean emails about this topic. But I mean, if you're watching a TV show about a relatively leftist state with a female prime minister, you're probably not going to disagree with us on that.
Right.
And if you do, well, that's your
Then,
business.
then that's okay. You're entitled to
You're
everyone.
entitled to your opinion.
Yeah.
And I hope none of you are ever in a situation where that happens.
Yep.
And have to deal with the consequences of like these difficult decisions.
Agreed.
And lucky for Kasper, you know, he does have Katrine's support. He should have told, I think he should have told Birgitte as well. I think he should have told her.
I think he probably did not. And I was thinking that as you were talking here a bit earlier. I think he did not tell Birgitte because two things. Maybe he doesn't want it to cloud his professional appearance and, you know, not wanting her to think he's breaking down and he's not going to be there for her and he can't handle it. Right? He'll need to take, you know, time off or but he should take time off. If something
he should take it.
You should take time off to heal and take care of yourself.
Yeah, and she would definitely encourage that.
Maybe
I'm sure
want to bother her with this.
Yeah, maybe
this story because she's busy. But on the other hand, I think if he did tell Birgitte, and we talked about this in the Hoxenhaven episode, we're happy with the way that she reacts to personal situations.
Yes.
She listens to things with respect and no judgment.
Yes.
She really takes care of people, right? Like how many times did we say she could have dropped the hammer on Hoxenhaven and didn't?
Yeah,
especially
exactly.
when she heard this story, she tried to think of a solution to bail him out. I think if Kasper told Birgitte what was happening to him, she would definitely have made time to speak to him one-on-one, made time to come to the service with him.
Yes.
Because she's a loving person, I think.
Yes. And I think also that she would have helped him find help if he needed it.
Yes, because she's emotionally mature and intelligent, and she knows that your people, you are only as good as the people around you.
Yeah.
As a boss, I'm not a boss, but a boss is only as successful and productive and accomplished as what their people can help give them.
Ideally, yes.
In theory, yes. In theory, yes. And in theory, a boss should care about that. So I think she would have responded very well. But
she's also a mother.
She's also a mother. And
she's also a mother.
She would not ever want that to happen to one of her kids. She's got a boy and she's got a girl.
Yeah.
Right.
And Magnus at this point is the same age. Around the same age.
Yeah, or getting there.
Around the same age as Kasper would have been at the beginning of this abuse cycle. So she would very much be able to understand how horrifying that is.
Yeah.
To happen to a young boy. I mean, this is the point, Magnus is still our little blonde angel baby. Oh my God, I love him so much.
I love him too. I like what you said, Amy, in the last season we recorded, you said, blonde angel baby makes me want to have one. Almost.
Yeah. I borrow other people's kids, not in that way, not in Kasper Dad's creepy way. Okay. I'm a professional. I mean, as a friend, as a sort of substitute aunt or extra aunt who's not actually part of the family. No. And I have a nephew. My nephew's going to grade 10. Can you believe that? Unbelievable. If he was in my school, he would be in my class.
So question for you. How do you think this conversation or this reveal from Kasper to Katrine has helped them in the
it's going to
next few episodes, and
it will heal that trust problem between them, because now Katrine knows everything. So his erratic behavior now has an explanation and it can be addressed. I mean, and now ideally, if I was writing these characters and it was just a show about them, I would get him some therapy, honey. Yeah. He would be doing the work. He would be in a support group. He would have people to talk to. He would meet other dudes that he could be friends with and talk about stuff with.
Absolutely.
And I would love to see a show about a character like this who builds up a network of male friends
Yeah.
In the same way, like we see, all these female friendships portrayed in the media, and like, especially like, if we're obviously, pro-female, pro-feminist types in this like feminist kind of way where, your circle of friends can be more than just a circle of friends. It's a chosen family. It's a support network. It's a professional network. We network. And I think part of the reason a lot of men suffer from, feeling like alienated and angry and dislocated and disconnected from things is because they don't have this kind of network. And if men were able to express themselves more emotionally, more honestly,
Yeah.
have networks of friends, cry about stuff,
Yeah.
talk about feelings, then they would be much, much healthier emotionally and have way better relationships with themselves and everybody else.
Yeah. And partners too, right?
Yes.
And I think I think Katrine is such a star in terms of the way she reacted to Kasper. And it's no doubt also her experience as a journalist, having met so many people and covered stories around, Europe, the world,
Yeah.
whatever, having that empathy and compassion for people that are different from her. Of
Yes.
course, she would be a good friend to anyone, a friend,
Yes.
but as a partner, I think Casper is so lucky to have her because I do think she's so genuine and empathetic towards him.
Yes. And I think deep down he knows that. And that's why he's never let her go, because he never lets her go throughout the whole, like the Hoxenhaven episodes, right? Where they're at that retreat and the
Right.
sneaky photographs are taken and all those things. We see them bonded together. We see them, remembering their experiences together.
Yeah.
And, they never quite let each other go.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another point I was going to make that has now slipped my mind. I can't remember what it is. Maybe it'll come back to me in a second.
Casper knows that and has always felt that, but this is a very it's like standing at the edge of a diving board. And
Yes.
you're falling into safe waters. You're wearing a life jacket. Katrina's
Yes.
life jacket, but he's still trepidatious to jump off. And I could appreciate that when you have something that's so deeply personal and private that you want to say, but you don't know how to say it, you don't know how to vocalize it, you don't know how you're going to be perceived, but worse, you don't know how they're going to respond.
Yeah.
And if they respond poorly, to lose that love and trust and care that you had in them because you made this announcement about yourself. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, you're never going to get forward or be who you truly are and allow yourself to be loved if you don't open up and say it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And like, yeah, I remember what I was going to say. So even through all his like, flirting with other people and running into different, the person he sleeps with is like, oh, remember we hooked up at the such and such Christmas party, blah, blah, blah. We were very drunk, blah, 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 blah. And all the different people that he sees at the very end of things, for Kasper, it's Katrine. He wants to be with her. He pursues her. He never lets her go. Look at how dumb he reacts when she starts going out with the guy from the gym.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then he makes fun of him and like, he's like interrupts them and like is a real dick about it.
Yeah,
because he can't let her go.
He can't let her go. But let's also chat about very quickly about his girlfriend just before that. Was that Lotta, right? Lotta?
Isn't he still living with her when this happens, or have they broken up?
I'm not sure, but what I wanted to say about that, there was a scene between her and Katrine and him. They were in a coffee shop one morning. Remember that?
Yes.
The two women were side by side. And I think that was my episode that I covered. And the point that I made there was that these two women look alike.
Yeah. Yeah. They're very similar types. Yes.
Very similar types. So it's like he can't let go of that image of this is who I want to be with, but I can't really. Yeah. So,
and I mean, he ends up screwing things up with Lotta because A, he's still pursuing Katrine, and B, he's lying to her too.
Yeah.
So all of these webs of lies catch him out in the end. And now that he doesn't have to lie to Katrine anymore, the biggest hurdle in their relationship, assuming that like he's going to heal from this trauma, is their professional personal border. That's going to be the problem in the future, because you know she's going to try to get information from him, he has to hide information from her, she can't tell him what she knows, there'll be that kind of thing going on, but that's more manageable, and it's kind of that was present in their relationship to begin with anyway. So it's something new they can navigate. But yeah, that's my take on it. And it was just such an interesting plot line to see, and so unusual.
I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah, me too.
100%. And I think our listeners, they're going to be with us too, because the important thing in any shows or stories we read, we want to see true representations of people.
Yes.
I don't want to see fabricated nonsense recycled over and over.
The same tropes. Yeah.
And raw about what is it that makes you tick, and why are you so upset all the time? What happened to you? And I want to peel back those layers and understand these people. And I think a lot of, and we talked about this in a previous podcast episode of ours, is that with American television, we were saying everything is so glossed over.
Yes.
That you need to have people that all look the same. They all have to look perfect. They all need to be tall and thin and all this,
and the super white teeth.
Everyone's got perfect hair. They've got extensions, hair pieces, whatever.
Yeah.
And they have the same story as, oh, I'm rich. I'm straight. I have a husband. I have a wife. I have children. Like it's just
house, car, suburbs.
Tiresome. It's tiresome. Yep. I don't want to see this. I want to see stories like what we just saw here about Kasper, because these are the stories that exist in the real world. These are the struggles that people go through in the real world. And I want to see more of it to create a space for people that are going through that to know that they can get out of this and there is another side to it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed.
Yeah.
And it is nice to see that. And I think actually, eventually we should do another bonus episode about the way men characters are generally portrayed in this series. It's something we haven't really addressed. And I think eventually that's a topic that we should look at, because they're very well drawn, complex characters, and a number of different men have these quite complex plot lines. Huxenhaven, Kasper, later on in the series, Bant, Torben later on in the series has an interesting
Torben.
Yeah,
even Jeremy, Brigitte's partner, boyfriend. Later on, we meet him soon. Actually, we're almost talking about season 2, but talking about him and what does he offer as a boyfriend? What is the appeal? I do read social media comments. I do read threads of discussions about Borgen.
Yeah, me too.
And there's quite a few people recently I've been noticing that don't like Jeremy.
Interesting.
I think it's going to be a really good bonus episode. We should start not start immediately. We're talking right now, but we should think about how we want to flesh that out, because I think that's something our listeners would also like to hear about, because this is a female-centric show with our main characters of Birgitte, Katrine, and Han. I think the core of this series, especially in season 1 and 2. But also I want to pay attention to the men, because I think outside of Borgen, as we say, especially in American television, I don't think the focus is always on men as much.
Yeah, or when it is, it's a very
stereotypical,
like manly man kind of thing.
Yeah,
and this is quite different from that.
Exactly.
I mean, unfortunately, there's ask any actress in Hollywood who gets the more diverse roles. It's men, right? Men always have the complicated storylines. Women are just like they're
actually, I was listening to a podcast of Scandinavian actress, actually, and she was talking just about that, about how women are given less juicy roles. By the time they're 40, they're like done.
Your career's
okay. The wages are much lower. And we know that from also following stories about North American, productions. But men also have more job opportunities. So if a man goes to a job and it's not the right offer, he could just say, well, I'm not taking this. I have 2 other things lined up.
Yeah,
for a woman, you're seen as expiring a bit in this business. So you may only get one role. So you have to put up with a low salary and, the supporting actress, not the main star of the show. Right.
And who in Hollywood gets their careers blacklisted and sidelined by powerful, greedy, disgusting men? Not other men.
Not other women, you mean?
Yeah. Well,
it's
women whose careers are sidelined by rich, powerful, greedy, disgusting men.
Yes.
Mira Sorvino, her career got sidelined by Harvey Weinstein.
And so many other women got sidelined by him.
Yeah, not just her. Yeah, many women.
And this touches upon what you said in the very beginning of this recording today, when you talked about how women are raised to expect this. I think there's no actress or budding actress out there whose parents or agent or manager or professional colleagues have not said to them, or senior colleagues have not said to them, listen, when you go into a meeting with this person, watch out for this. I don't know if you have to do that in meetings with other men. Likely not.
Very probably sometimes, but probably not nearly as often.
No.
And the other interesting thing about that is so I being quite a film fan and a big kind of I have a great interest in the 1920s as a period, as a historic period, artistic period. Actually, from the 1880s to like the Second World War is my most favorite period in literature and history, in Europe especially. And in Hollywood, at the start of Hollywood in the 1920s, Louise Brooks played in a number of silent films and was a big star for Paramount, I think. And she split and went to Europe to go work with George Pabst because of the way she was treated on the casting couch. The casting couch is called the casting couch for a reason. That stuff has been going on in Hollywood since its inception. So she was very often like harassed. She was asked to like sleep with different directors. If you look at scandals from the 1920s in Hollywood, they are incredible and just as juicy as anything that you would see today. And, as vile, right? So she wrote a memoir called Lulu in Hollywood. And if anyone here can find it, I don't even know if it's in print anymore, but it's certainly around in libraries and stuff. Find it, read it, check it out, because that process has been in place since the 1920s in Hollywood. So, it's things like the Me Too movement are way overdue in coming, like decades overdue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Agreed.
And on that note, I think we should probably wrap this episode up. I think we've talked a lot about everything, unless you have anything else to add.
No, I don't have anything else to add, but I think this conversation was really good to touch upon this subject, and also for us to, in our thought process, to do another bonus episode in the near future about sort of profiling all the key men on the show.
Yeah.
And comparing and contrasting them. And, they all have issues and flaws and good points. And I think it'd be nice to highlight that. So listeners can look forward to that coming out in the future. So with that, we'd like to thank our listeners for joining us on this bonus episode. You can check us out on our website, theborgenpodcast.com, where all of our podcast episodes are archived, and you can learn more about us and the show. We'd like to thank our good friend Garth Jensen for providing our intro and outro music. Thank you very much, Garth. And lastly, don't forget to check us out on all social media platforms. We are there. And don't forget to subscribe to us so you know when we have a new episode released. And feel free to be in touch with us through our email at theborgenpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to connect with us and share what's on your mind by finding us on social media.